Greetings, dear viewers. You are on the CrossMoto channel. What do you think could be in common between the production of tin cans, inline twins from Japanese motorcycle manufacturers, and Friedel München? Horex unites seemingly unrelated objects and personalities under one brand. In this episode, I want to tell you about the history of these German motorcycles. Enjoy watching. The story we're looking at begins a little over 100 years ago in 1920 in Germany, with two people from the same family. The first is Friedrich Clement, financial manager and co-owner of Rex Konserven Glasgesellschaft, a canned goods company. The second is his son Fritz Clement, born in 1901. By the age of 19, Fritz had already interned at Ford in Detroit, worked at Opel and at his father's company Rex, and was also a motorcyclist and aviator. And in that very year, 1920, he convinced his father to acquire Columbus Motorenbau AG, a small engine manufacturing company. Columbus's peak years were during World War I, when it made aircraft engines. However, the war ended unfavorably for Germany, and the Treaty of Versailles was signed, one of the clauses of which was the restriction of certain industries and sectors in Germany, particularly armaments and aviation. A number of companies that were raking in money just yesterday had to either shut down or urgently reorient themselves. Columbus was one of these firms. After the war, they started producing auxiliary motors for bicycles. In 1920, the company was acquired by the Clements. In 1921, a 68cc auxiliary engine called Gnome was developed, and Fritz began installing these engines on bicycles and selling this equipment. These motorized bicycles were produced until 1924. In 1923, aviation engineer Edward Fries developed a prototype motorcycle featuring a 250cc four-stroke overhead valve engine, and the frame was manufactured by the Maschinenfabrik Stein Company. And in the same year, Fritz renamed his motorcycle production to Horex Fahrzeugbau AG. The word Horex was derived from the name of his hometown, Hamburg, the full name being Bad Homburg, and Rex was the name of his father's company. Fritz's wins on the new motorcycle showed its technical potential, leading the company to start mass production themselves. Fritz Clement in the 1920s and 1930s would make his motorcycle brand famous with 5, 10, and 5 victories in races. And yes, it can be confidently stated that the motorcyclist made machines for other motorcyclists. And this is not just my opinion. Fritz Clement had a motto, created by motorcyclists for motorcyclists. It's also worth noting that Clement admired the British school of motorcycle engineering, and Horex motorcycles clearly show features of British technology. Moreover, in the second half of the 1920s, Horex acquired a license to produce English Sturmey Archer engines. The 250cc model went into mass production in 1924 under the name HA, and in 1925, Horex and Columbus merged. And in the same year, the lineup was expanded with the T5 and T6 models, featuring 500cc and 600cc side valve single-cylinder engines. In 1929, the overhead valve version of the 500cc engine, the C5 model, appeared. Changes and innovations began in the new decade. Vault Film, 1931-1932, Horex expands its range of produced machines with the 200cc C2 model and the 300cc C3. Secondly, engineer Hermann Ribb, who worked at Horex from 1927 to 1932, creates an innovative inline two-cylinder overhead valve engine. This long-stroke engine had a 3-bearing crankshaft, and the camshaft was also 3-bearing. The camshaft was driven by a chain drive located on the right side. Horex parallel twins had 600 and 800cc displacements, sharing piston stroke. Only cylinder diameter differed. Why is this power unit innovative? In the early 1930s, 4-stroke inline twins were only seen in some racing motorcycles, especially Peugeot models from the 1920s. No production motorcycles have such an engine, and engineers consider this layout to be too wide and unbalanced. Edward Turner started the stylish twin trend on Triumph motorcycles in 1937. It turns out that Herman Ribb and the Horex company were 5 years ahead of the British in this regard. Fritz Kleemann was initially skeptical about Ribb's development. The economic crisis echoing the Great Depression offered little hope for pricey motorcycles. In spring 1933, the market revived unexpectedly, and Kleemann approved mass production of the new model. That year, 2 motorcycle models debuted, the 24-horsepower C6 and the 30-horsepower C8. As Fritz Kleemann feared, the high price led to very limited demand. Production of the 2-cylinder Horex models lasted only 2 years. During that time, 82 600s and 96 800s were sold. It is worth noting that the Horex Columbus company offered its engines to anyone interested, and there was a buyer for the parallel twins. A small German company, Tornax, installed this engine on its Tornado model. The racing version of the Horex C8 for sidecar motorcycle races deserves special mention. The engine was maximized to the allowed volume limit of 1 liter with a displacement of 995 cubic centimeters. The cylinders were made of aluminum, and the heads were made of a bronze alloy. The naturally aspirated engine produced 58 horsepower, and work was also being done to equip the engine with a supercharger on this machine. Racers Braun and Batsching became the German champions in sidecar motorcycle racing in 1935. In 1934, the 350cc S35 debuted, followed a year later by the overhead valve single-cylinder 600cc S64. In the late 1930s, engineers Richard Cushion and Hermann Ribb developed a 350cc 4-stroke long-stroke engine for the SB35 model, which was used until the war began. This engine was also supplied to Victoria Verkey for KR 35 models. Since Horex motorcycles were not listed as main Wehrmacht equipment, they weren't supplied to the military, and production stopped when the war began. As of 1945, the Horex factory was producing spare parts for engines used in the railway and agricultural industries. In 1948, Horex was the first German manufacturer approved by the Allies to produce motorcycles with engines over 250 cubic centimeters. This made it possible to resume production of the SB35 model, and some parts were used for the SB35 as well. For the first time, Horex started installing a telescopic fork, and in 1950, the Regina 350 model was released to the market with a telescopic fork and a plunger rear suspension. As a further development of the SB35 model, the Regina 350 became the company's most successful motorcycle. As of 1952, it was the best-selling model. By this time, 25,000 units had been built, but after that, sales volume steadily declined to 2,500. In 1956, to stop the decline in sales that began, in 1953, the 250 model was released in addition to the 350. In the post-war period, Hermann Ribb developed a more advanced version of his inline twin, the Horex Imperator. In 1951, the Horex company introduced the Imperator model. With an overhead valve engine of 500 cc, it produced a maximum power of 30 horsepower and allowed the motorcycle to reach a speed of 150 kilometers per hour. The model didn't go to Syria immediately because the market wasn't ready for costly large equipment. The 6 units produced were used for testing and racing. Mass production starts in 1954 with a slightly reduced Imperator 400 model in 1958. However, the Imperator's engine capacity will increase by 50 cce in a overfuel cylinder and gigabyte at Yamaha Company. In 1955, the logical continuation of the Regina model was a new line of 2 resident motorcycles. Horex machines performed well in post-war races. From 1950, racing prototypes were systematically built, like this one based on the Regina model in 350 and 250cc versions. The 350 with 2 overhead camshafts produced about 36 horsepower, and reached a speed of 200 km/h. You can't say the machines were outstanding, but the racing Horex bikes had impressive reliability. In 1952, Hermann Gablens made it to the podium at the German Grand Prix on this motorcycle, and at the World Championship, he finished in 10th place. The German racer Georg Braun also competed on a Horex in 1953-54. And the last time these motorcycles appeared was at the Monza Grand Prix in 1960. Due to difficulties with sales, the Horex company stopped producing motorcycles in 1956. The remaining Imperator stock was sold in the United States to Zündap importers as the Citation 500E. Until the early 60s, advertisements claimed a power of 40 horsepower and a guaranteed speed of 160 kilometers per hour. Horex had an idea to create an aircraft engine based on the Imperator engine for small airplanes, but the attempt was not successful. In 1960, the factory facilities were acquired by the Daimler-Benz Group. The factory was closed, and the rights to the brand passed from the Clement family to Friedel Münch. Yes, the same Friedel Münch who built the legendary Münch Mammut motorcycle. There's a separate story about this remarkable chapter in motorcycle history on the channel. Actually, Friedel. Since 1955, for a short period, he worked in the Horex racing department, and before that, he raced on a personally modified Horex C5 motorcycle called Horex. Between 1978 and 1983, he built 3 Horex 1400 Ti motorcycles. This motorcycle was equipped with a modified NSU engine. The inline 4-stroke engine with a displacement of 1,338 cubic centimeters and a turbocharger produced about 140 horsepower at maximum output, which allowed the 300 kilogram 1400 Ti to boast a top speed of 250 kilometers per hour. In the early 80s, Münch sold the rights to the Horex brand to two-wheeled vehicle importer Fritz Roth, who at that time was selling mopeds, mo-kicks, and enduro bikes. With Roth and CK Design involved, in 1988, the Horex 644 OSCA motorcycle was developed. This street bike was equipped with a single-cylinder 644cc engine from Honda, tuned for a maximum of 50 horsepower and 57 Newton meters of torque. From 1990 to 1998, the rights belonged to Bahage's Berlin division. MCET bought the company in the mid-90s and held the rights from 1996 to 1998. It used the Horex brand and assembled light motorcycles, Horex Imperator 125 and Horex Regent 125. Needless to say, these motorcycles had nothing in common with the classic Horex motorcycles. In 2007, the rights to the brand were acquired by Clemens Niese, who planned to revive the brand. The revival of the company took place in 2010, and on June 15, 2010, the new owners presented the company's new model at a press conference. At the same time, this was not just an average run-of-the-mill motorcycle. The new Horex VR6 boasted an engine that was completely untypical for the motorcycle industry. This 6-cylinder VR-type engine with a displacement of 1,218 cc boasts excellent characteristics, namely 161 horsepower at maximum power and 138 Nm of torque. The 2 rows of cylinders are set at a 15-degree angle, making this 6-cylinder engine exceptionally compact. And since the cylinders are positioned very compactly relative to each other, 3 camshafts are used in the single-cylinder head. Niese and his team were diligently refining the motorcycle's design and planned to start mass production, but the launch was postponed due to various difficulties. 2011, 2012, a small company with a staff of 22 employees produced a certain number of Horex VR6 motorcycles at the end of 2012 and 2013. But due to financial difficulties, Clemens filed for bankruptcy in 2014, and at this point, the story of this interesting motorcycle could have ended forever. However, things turned out differently. At the beginning of 2015, all rights to the Horex motorcycle company were bought by the 3C Carbon Group, which breathed new life and resources into the project. The In 2016, the updated Horex VR6 was presented at the Intermot Motorcycle Show in Cologne. The VR6 is produced in small batches in several versions. To this day, there's a separate story about this unique motorcycle on the channel. In 2023, a limited edition of the Regina Evo model was introduced, featuring a 600cc, 48 horsepower single-cylinder engine. This is the story of the German Horex motorcycles. This is where my story comes to an end. As usual, this was the Cross Moda channel with you. Thank you so much for watching and for your activity on the channel. Special thanks to everyone who supports the channel financially using the pinned details. See you next time.